Thanks to all of you for being here and helping us to kick off Brainstorm Design. Harry, I want to open with you, if I could. So we've talked a little bit about the evolution of how corporations and businesses and people that work in tech have thought about design over the last, say, 20 years or so, and how it's progressed. What, in your sense, give us a sense of the moment that we're in right now. What's driving the increased interest in design on the part of businesses, and what's the next phase in that evolution?
So what's driving the interest, the importance of design is the customer. Because over the last 20 years or so, customers have been given much, much more power than they have in the past. Because of the rise of the internet, mobile communication, social networks, customers now have more choice, and they have more ways to express that choice. And so today, a brand is not what it says, it's what it does. Brand communication still matters, but brand experience matters more. And it's designers who are central to creating brand experiences.
And what's your sense of how widely that is now understood among Fortune 500 companies, disruptive startups? Do we still need to sort of spread the word on that, or are people pretty widely starting to understand it?
I think that most companies are getting it now. They recognize that design is going to be central to how they compete in the future. But I'm not sure that companies know how to do it yet. There's a big difference between saying that design is important and then actually following through and making the changes in your organization that are necessary in order for design to thrive and to succeed in your organization. And some of my colleagues here are fortunate to be working for companies that are beginning to embrace that. But I think those are the exceptions rather than the rule.
Great observation. Maria, I'm going to ask you to maybe pick up on that insight, the difficulty of figuring out how to do it.
Yep.
Is that your sense also,
Oh, yeah.
where companies struggle? And how do you get past that obstacle?
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more. It's that, everybody wants design now. It's like the new thing. But really actually doing design inside companies is easier said than done. And I think there's a bunch of obstacles that get in the way when we talk about bringing design in-house. The first one is really culture change. I mean, the combination of old world thinking and new world thinking inside organizations create culture clashes and create resistance to make the changes necessary to weave design into businesses. The second one would be processes. A lot of processes, especially we've worked in the world of legacy software. It's very hard to weave new design thinking when you have to grapple with old technology. And in product design, there's this agile process. It's an engineering-based process that it makes hard to weave design into that. And then the third one is power. Traditionally, business leaders had all the power. They made all the decisions. And now business leaders have to share power with functional leaders like designers. And those things inhibit design from happening inside many companies, whether it's actually a startup or corporate America.
So I've heard you talk about this before, and it's a fairly profound point. Design needs to be fused with power. It needs to be something that comes from the top down.
Yes.
And have the mandate of the CEO behind it. And yet, often if you're gunning for the top job to be CEO, it doesn't help your career very much to be established as a creative type, right?
Well, I think the data is changing now, right? I mean, it was years ago, it was design was considered a weakness.
Yeah.
But since 2011, when IBM's study came out, I'm sure you all saw that study where they said that the #1 leadership trait is creativity. And since 2011, you're seeing more and more data that's coming out where leaders, especially CEOs, have to be much more enlightened. And they have to be much more customer-centric. They have to be much more humanistic. And when they do so, they'll have increased market share and greater customer loyalty. So we're seeing, I think, the birth of enlightened CEOs.
So I want to turn to Mauro next, because PepsiCo is in many ways the kind of classic case study of a company that has really gotten religion about design and seen that drive results in their bottom line, has a CEO who not only talks the talk but walks the walk on it, and is a real evangelist for the power of design. I wonder, this may be a bit of a curveball for you, but I've heard Indra Nooyi speak about when she first decided to really drive design change. And I don't know whether this was when you came on board or just before you came on board, but she talked about how she had asked all of her direct reports to put together a kind of visual journal of what design meant to them and just kind of free associate a little bit. And you know what I'm talking about? What happened?
I know the story very well. Because when she interviewed me, she told me the story.
She did? Is that right?
It was before
you came.
I came in, and because she tried to do design without building design in-house before, working exclusively with external firm, and she really wanted to build the right culture within the organization, starting with his direct reports. He asked his direct reports to create this journal. They had few months, and when they came back, few didn't do it anyway. Few did it, and it was really bad. and there were a couple that were amazing, but she found out later that they asked a design firm to do it for them. But she realized that there was not that understanding of design. She needed to build design in-house to really build the culture from within, integrating the DNA of the company. But something to keep in mind that is extremely important, I totally agree that you need a top-down push. You need the SEO or an executive person to protect this new entity, else the company is going to reject it. In the meantime, you also need a bottom-up push. You need to work in the middle of the company with what I like to call the co-conspirators, those individuals that have the power to run projects or brands or drive innovation within the company. With them, you build the proof points. You really create things that everybody can resonate with, the wins in the market, and then the body of the company will follow. So I think you need both top-down and bottom-up together.
Can you give us a kind of a snapshot of what the in-house design team now looks like at Pepsi? How many people you are? What's the range of sort of capabilities and talents that you've assembled?
Yeah, well, we are starting. We are about 200 people, of which 100 in Manhattan, in New York, and then we have teams in Dallas, Chicago, Moscow, London. We're building Dubai, Shanghai, Mexico City. And there is a very broad variety of design skill set, from brand design, strategy and innovation, industrial, digital, architecture, experience. So it's very, very broad. And then there is a culture where it's not just about design. So you need to have, especially the more senior people, they need to have an approach to design that is as holistic as possible. You know, in our world, when you study industrial design, you are in that silos, and it's not that easy to understand other worlds of design, as well as in the other silos. So we need to find designers that have a very holistic approach to design. Second, they need to be business savvy. They need to really understand the business. This alibi, we are creative, we don't understand the business, doesn't work if we want to be part of the creation of the strategy of the company. They need to have a very high EQ and empathy, not just to understand people, the consumers, the people we design for, but also to understand the rest of the organization and how to bring the rest of the organization with us. And connected to that idea, we need to have a very big respect for the other functions within the company. It's so easy for us, creative community, to say, the business world doesn't get it. R&D doesn't get it. Or vice versa, for the business world to think that design doesn't understand certain kind of variables that are important to grow a business or to drive innovation. I think the idea of respect, deeply understanding in front of you, you have somebody, probably, if you are there in a company like PepsiCo in a key marketing position, you're not that stupid, So respect starting from the individual respect. That will help you understanding why eventually the person in front of you, the function in front of you, doesn't completely understand what you're trying to do. And then you will try to understand how to explain what you do to them using their language, their point of view, their mindset. I found in this idea of respect really the key to build that integration that then drives innovation. Because at the end of the day, it's not about marketing, it's not about design, it's not R&D or any other function, but it's about all of these functions working together. Focus on people, on consumer, and that's how you really make the difference.
Remarkable. Justin, Salesforce, one of the largest, most dynamic companies in the world. But I'm guessing, I don't have sort of precise market survey data in hand on this, but I bet if you went up to the average person on the street and you said, what's the first thing that pops into your mind when I say design? They won't say enterprise software. Right? So tell us a little bit about how design works at a company like Salesforce, and what are you designing?
Design at Salesforce is actually interesting in that it covers the entire spectrum from marketing creatives who are responsible for getting the message out, connecting the customers in a way, right? But we also, and product design, which I lead.
Right.
But we also have two other large groups, which are really sort of a pre-sales, consultative sales arm, if you will, that comes in and does actually the kind of work I used to do at Frog, to work with customers to understand their needs and say, here's how these building blocks could be used in a bespoke way for you in your problem space. And then actually a post-sales design consulting arm that can go in. So first was to try and tell a story and connect to our customers through the entire cycle with us, not to leave a gap there, if you will, which I think is pretty unique for a company our size. In terms of, you're right, in fact, when I got the call to go to Salesforce, I was like, Salesforce?
Oh, what?
Yeah, you don't necessarily associate design with that, but I think the challenge for anything that's sort of back office or enterprise is actually the customer. And what I mean by that is, we always talk about, from an engineering side, how do we get things to market faster, right? Continuous delivery. What we don't talk enough about is continuous uptake. The rate of change that consumers are willing to uptake in the consumer space is constant. Your phone teaches you, you get an update all the time. Corporations, our customers, they actually are trying to build moats around whatever they've put in place, and their objective in life is to reduce any change to zero, even if that actually hurts long-term their operations and how they run their business. So a lot of what we've been thinking about lately on the enterprise side is how we enable uptake and learning as part of the entire end-to-end process from our developer community all the way through to the end user.
That's really interesting, and in a way it seems to relate to Mauro's comment about respect. You have to respect where your customer is, what they're dealing with, what kind of experience they're bringing to understanding design. I have a sort of meta question for you about this, though, which is that, so you're working with companies, and they're your customers, right, these enterprises, and then they've got customers. And you're helping them read their data, and you're helping them to design their software, their program, their interactions with their customers in a way that's going to be successful. But you're working at such huge scale, and you've now got so many design resources at Salesforce. I'm guessing that it's often the case that you see things that the businesses that you work with don't see. If they would just do it this way, it would achieve their goals so much better for them. How is that difficult to be working with customers that you feel like you may understand the needs of their end user better than your customer?
I don't know that I'd say it's difficult. I actually think that's part of the fun of the challenge, right? Is that when I said about that enablement, that uptake, it's not just helping in sort of a walk me, if you use that kind of tooling sort of for an end user. But, we visit a customer and they say, gosh, this part of our product your product loads slowly. And we sit down and we they show us. And they open up a form that has 500 fields on it. And you're like, well, why did we make the developer tools for this person allow them to put 500 fields on a page? Like, so putting guardrails in place and making it hard to do dumb things, right, in the tooling. That's
good. That's a good definition of designer's role, right? Making it hard to do dumb things. We could all benefit from having a designer advise us on that in that way, I suspect. Harry, you're in a bit of an analogous situation in the sense that you're working for companies that are working to serve customers. And so you've got to work with them and also understand the needs of what their customers want. And sometimes you've got to figure out ways to get them to see their customers and understand their customers in new ways. Last year, I had the opportunity to just come visit you at the Frog Studio in Dumbo. It was fascinating. And you gave me a glimpse of this project that you were working with a big pharmaceutical company who will remain nameless, and the product will remain nameless. But so it was amazing. I was ushered into what I thought was going to be a studio, but it was a living room. And there were little stations around the living room that were stations that represented the end users of this drug. And what the people at Frog had done is they had gone out like anthropologists, and they had really spent time with the people who used the drug. Spent like weeks just hanging out with them to understand what they were like. And they had created these kind of visual journals and audio journals. They had recorded interviews with them, and then they had edited it all together. And so there were about 8 of them, as I remember. And they've created a living room for the client to come in and sit and talk about their customers, because that's the way they heard these stories from the end users. And I was really moved by it. I mean, to hear the woman talking about how her dog helped her get through the difficult disease, to say, this is the impact that it had on my relatives. This was the worst day of my illness. This is when I eventually turned the corner and I started to recover. And you took, in 8 cases, people through that whole journey. So what's the goal of doing that? Once you do all that work, it's almost like being a journalist in a way. What's the end result of it in your interaction with the customer?
So the goal is to build customer empathy, not for us, but for our client.
Yeah.
So what you saw there was the prototype that we then installed within our client's organization. Okay, and many people within the organization went through that process so that they could really understand firsthand what it was like to be one of those patients. Yeah. And the role that the drug that they were creating and marketing and servicing was playing in those people's lives. And it was critical. And what comes out of that is a customer-centric organization, which is what we're trying to build. And the net result is that the R&D team is better informed about what it is they need to do in the future, so better products. Everybody else in the organization has a better understanding of the impact that they're having in their work, and so there's better retention in the organization. So the combination of better products, which leads to, I'm sorry, I'm going to be crass here. I'm going to show how we go all the way from that emotional experience down to the bottom line. Right. Okay, we go from that emotional experience to driving better products that drives growth for the company, plus better retention, which improves better respect for the impact that they're having, which improves employee morale and drives retention, which reduces cost. Right. Okay, so that's why they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in building that very, very emotional experience.
That's really fascinating. It ties into a lot of the conversations that Alan and my colleagues at Fortune have at the CEO Initiative, which is that one of the real challenges of CEOs in the kind of modern age is to not just throw thunderbolts and orders down from the top of Mount Olympus and tell people what to do, but their role is to go out and communicate and inspire people and to kind of imbue a sense of meaning and worth into the activities of all their employees. To say, it's not just that you're collecting a paycheck, it's that you're doing something that's really important. The other thing that was fascinating to me about that studio is that, if I remember right, one of the outcomes was that it helped the company to see new opportunities for creating products and services. Yeah. In other words, to help the company say, I'm not just in the business of selling this drug. I'm in the business of helping these people in this community all along their patient journey. And there may be a zillion other points, both before the drug, both after the drug, in the recovery, where we have an expertise that can bring to bear on that.
Yeah, and that's a very powerful observation. Drug companies, and I can generalize this, drug companies are realizing that their job is not just to produce a molecule, a chemical, but it is to help people. And the molecule, the chemical, the drug, is a very important way to help, but there's other ways to help. and that they can fulfill their mission better and more profitably if they take a more holistic approach to helping their customers and their patients. Actually, I'd just like to take issue with one point that you raised, which is that CEOs might not wish to be associated with the term design. I think they need to be.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be vital for CEOs in the future, because let's kind of rephrase it and talk about change. Okay? Any company that thinks that their current products or services don't need to change, well, you're not going to be around for very long. Okay? So your products need to change. And why do they need to change? It's because your customers are going to demand better products and services, better experiences. And what is the way that you get to those better products and services? It's through design. So it's not just through design, but design is a vital part of that. So I think if we can make that connection clear, then it is absolutely clear that design and leadership are inextricably bound together.
Justin, do you want to comment on that?
I want to jump on that.
Just before you do, I want to remind people, we want to take your questions, so please be thinking of questions, and after Justin, we'll look for questions from the audience. There are mics roving around, and we'll hold up a paddle, so please, everyone, be ready for that. Yeah.
One of the privileges of working at Salesforce is working for Mark Benioff. And for those of you who've seen Salesforce's branding as of late, with sort of woods and bears and small animals and things, and national parks. And in a conversation with him about, we're pressing on him, why are you going down this path? Why national parks? His executive team. And he said, I'm going down this path because they're a free resource for education for the world. And if you think that coal miners are a problem right now, the next wave of people who are going to be displaced are white-collar workers. And the number one problem facing corporations in the next 10 years is going to be workforce re-education. So we're building a platform to enable people to train their workforces. And it's an example of a really long lens on a problem with some very tactical things that, even as a CEO, he's trying to drive that line all the way down to some tactics today that are about a 10-year event horizon that he's seeing. And that's a great example of being design-focused as a CEO.
Questions? Anyone? Do I see a hand? If I'm missing one, there's one back here, huh? Okay. And please tell us your name and your affiliation.
Sure, I'm Paola Antonelli from the Museum of Modern Art.
Paola.
I wanted to ask you all, you must be hiring a lot of designers, like IBM hired 1,000 designers in the past few years. Where do they come from?
Where's the secret supply of hidden designers?
That's a great question. Can I pick that one up? Yeah, I think one of the great things about design and designers is people come from all different disciplines to get to design. It's, there's learning design through traditional design channels, but I've been doing design for over 30 years, and although I was trained as a designer, people getting into interaction design in the early days were journalists, anthropologists. They came from all different disciplines to have this common love of designers. So there's the traditional design schools to look at, but you know what? You're not going to get a lot of diversity in traditional design schools because it's pretty elitist and pretty expensive. Then you have to look at, art schools. You can look at schools like CMU that have a hybrid that's a combination of engineering and design talent. So there's schools, but you also don't need to go through schools to find great designers. You could find them on the internet, coming up with the latest app. Finding design talent right now is like a scavenger hunt because everybody wants the top talent. So you have to go through multiple sources.
How do you search for them, though? What do you look for when you're looking for these kind of people?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. First of all, the first thing is baseline craft.
Yeah.
Do they have this craft? Do they have the critical thinking skills? But then for me, I like to look for insatiable curiosity, people who are really pushing the boundaries of thinking and doing things differently. And once you get to past looking their work, do they have humility? Because you don't want assholes. Right, and there's quite a bit of assholes in design, and you gotta look for people who are co-creative, and have a little bit of humility in the work, and realize that they're in service to others. That's not about them. And so though you have to look at those kinds of skills as well, in addition to well-crafted abilities.
Other questions? Anyone? I see one. All right, I'm going to ask Justin one. So a new species of designer seems to be in this category of people who design at scale and at speed, that are in the computational space, as people have started to call it. And that seems to be a bit of an irony. It's a contradiction of terms. How do you empathize with when you're rolling out a product or service to millions of people, at once? How does that work? Is that an oxymoron, or?
I don't think so, and I would actually take challenge with something you said earlier, which is that agile development is counter or bad for design.
I didn't say that.
I thought I heard you say that.
I said that the agile process was designed as an engineering process, and you have to fit design into the agile process, which doesn't always work. You have to kind of create
the principle
hybrid.
underlying that, which is one of continuous improvement, is the way you have to approach that, right? The way you deal with things at scale, the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time, right? The way you deal with large scale is put something out there and iterate fast, learn, keep going, right? Because if you're trying to do it all at once, that's just not going to work.
So we're going to have a discussion later in the program about design thinking, but does the kind of traditional approach to design thinking help or hinder that kind of solution?
Oh, he said the word.
I know.
Justin said the word. Justin.
Design
You knew we were going to come to
We
that.
hate that.
Yeah,
We hate that word.
That's not a favorite term of mine.
No.
Okay, tell us
one thing we
in a
haven't-
snapshot why that term bothers you.
Because it sold the idea that a process can stand in for really smart people. And it doesn't.
Well,
You can take really dumb people and hand them design thinking, and you're going to get dumb solutions.
Okay, all right.
the issue I have is that it's half a design. Design is about thinking and doing. You could think to the cows come home. At the end of the day, you have to deliver. So this word design thinking is really a stand-in for design strategy. So I'm here to re-educate everybody in the room to stop calling it design thinking and start calling it design strategy.
Okay, wow, we're really getting into it now. You can see that we've got a lot of great discussion. Let's go, Mauro. Yeah.
I want to defend design.
Excellent.
First, I think design implies the doing part and the execution, and the thinking is how you get there. So I think design thinking has both in it. But no matter that, design thinking finally gave us as designer this stage. The business community is listening to us because they heard this thing, design thinking, they start to believe in it. So this is branding. So if we
That's true. Very true.
abandon design
backhanded
thinking
defense,
right now, we're going to really impact our credibility, our seat at the table. Let's use design thinking. Let's embrace it. We know what there is behind. We know that if there is just process, it's not design thinking. The word design thinking implies that there is a human being thinking. And we've been talking so much about process because process is more reliable, is factual. But the reality is that I agree. If there is not a human being thinking behind the process, you don't deliver the right results.
Wow, this is fantastic.
Let's embrace design thinking.
All right, good. We've just scratched the surface of this topic. I think you've got a little bit of a flavor of the fun conversations that we have yet in store. Please join me in thanking our panel for this great and lively opening discussion. Thank you all. It's great. Thank you.